Hi, I'm Joanne Lee Cornish, body composition coach and slightly obsessed with being an outlier in midlife and beyond. I offer one-on-one coaching. I have 7 group coaching programs that I run throughout the year, and I also have a 10-month mentorship program. You can find out all about those and a lot more at my website, joannelee.com. Okay, let's get on with this podcast. Hello, and welcome to Midlife Mayhem. Oh my gosh, I have got a list of like 15 different topics I want to talk to you guys about. But I want to start by talking about thyroid and testosterone, both of which I've spoken about before, but both of which came up for me personally this week. So, a little bit of a backstory here. I was diagnosed, I guess, with hypothyroidism years ago. I'm talking about 16 years ago, something like that. 3 different doctors said the same thing. And although, thyroid is often just thought of as oh, it's weight loss or it's body composition, but it actually was not that. It was fatigue, it was severe cold intolerance, Raynaud's half the year, if you know what Raynaud's is. And a lot of people, dry skin, dry hair, mood disorders, cholesterol can change, constipation, things like this. I was about 39, 40 at the time. A lot of people just gets misdiagnosed or just undiagnosed, I should say. But thyroid issues do crop up a lot with ladies and gents later on in life. But again, unfortunately, they're often dismissed because if you've got, dry skin, dry hair, constipated, and you're tired and you're 55, you know, um, nobody's too worried about it. They just kind of put it down to age. If you're dealing with those sort of symptoms and you're, 35, it doesn't, or 25, it doesn't, you're more likely to look for the answer, which is what happened to me. But I say that only because if you are dealing with a lot of those symptoms, definitely do your blood work, definitely check your thyroid. So anyway, um, I've had that situation for a long time. Again, under 3 different doctors. Um, when I moved to Idaho, and well, not that, I shouldn't say that. So it was when my Dr. Howard in California died. Um, I had to find somebody else. And I started working with Abby Rhodes, and I was, same thing, my fatigue, the Raynaud's was back, the cold intolerance, checked my thyroid, even with medication, slightly under. Um, and so she changed it. And so been taking NP thyroid for about a year now. Um, so did my blood work a few weeks ago. I spoke to Abby this week, and 2 things came up that I'd like to talk to you about. Both of which I think I've talked about one of them before, but both of which I feel will be relevant to some of you. Not all of you, but definitely to some of you. So today I want to talk about the use of thyroid medication and the fact that it can actually help your thyroid, like heal your thyroid. I think too often the story is, oh, if you're on thyroid medication, you're on it for the rest of your life. You're doomed if you ever stop, and all this nonsense. And then there's testosterone. You're either for it, against it, or confused about it, or you like it but you don't want it. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm framing this I'm framing this for midlife ladies. Guys, listen on. Um, so what the experience I was having is I was feeling very wired in the morning. Cold issue has not been a problem. Very wired in the mornings. I drink coffee, but I don't like feeling like that. I don't like feeling wired or anxious. Don't like that. And I was feeling like that. And I thought, okay, there's 3 things going on here. I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, have done for my entire life, decades and decades, right? That's not unusual. But I always think it probably messes with my cortisol curve a little bit. The natural spike of cortisol would be 7 o'clock, but I'm sure me waking up that early kind of messes with it. I take my thyroid medication. I also drink a couple of cups of coffee, which, you're not meant to have the thyroid medication too close to coffee, and I try and separate them, but I'm probably not perfect. Anyway, perfect storm, cortisol, coffee, thyroid, wired. But not usually, not you. And this routine is nothing new at all. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm thinking it's this thyroid. So I don't take my thyroid medication for a day, and I feel tired, but I feel fine, completely calm, not wired, no anxiety, completely calm. I'm like, okay, at least we know the problem here. So what I did is I got a pill cutter and I cut all my pills in half. And I didn't take it for a few days. I thought, well, that's not smart. So I started taking half the dose, knowing that I had an appointment with Abby coming up within the month. So I speak to Abby this week, and I'm telling her, and okay. And she said, well, this is perfect because this is exactly what I wanted. The whole idea of that medication is that eventually, you need less and less and less of it, and maybe you don't even need it at all. And I said, well, that goes against, what most people believe of thyroid medication that, oh, you're on it, you're done, you're doomed, you're on it for life, and blah, blah, blah. Um, but with the bioidentical thyroid, which is what I take, um, it's actually reducing the stress on my liver, which is probably the reason that I'm now going to be taking less of it, half as much. So I thought I'd make a pretty good podcast episode because I know some people are terrified of thyroid medication, and it is a personal choice. But as is always the case for me, my use of HRT, my involvement in anything, I I want an optimal life. I want a happy life. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not going to be suboptimal when I can, through my own behaviors and education and you know and resources. So if I'm got blue lips and numb fingers and I've got dry skin, constipated and fatigued all the time, I'm not living like that. Yeah, I'm just not. And I felt the same way when I was going through menopause, premenopause, and two panic attacks and night sweats. And I'm not doing this. I'm not. And this is robbing my enjoyment from life. And again, it's a personal choice, and that was mine. So now let's get back to thyroid because today I want to talk about thyroid and I also want to talk about testosterone. So if you've ever been told that thyroid medication is something that you're just going to need more and more of and it's going to be forever, what I'm going to talk about here is going to be surprising because that really is the narrative that most women hear. Your thyroid is underactive, your hormones are declining, and this is just age. But what if that story is incomplete? And what if needing less thyroid over time is actually possible and is indeed a sign that your metabolism is actually becoming more efficient as you got older? So let's unpack to do that, I need to discuss the liver. And I gotta tell you, so many things, body composition, etc., come back to the liver. I mean, in my Muscle Month and Mastering Midlife program, I talk about the liver so much. But let's talk about it with regards to thyroid. So your thyroid gland does not primarily produce the active thyroid hormone. So the active thyroid hormone is T3. What the thyroid gland produces is T4. So T4 is more of a storage pro-hormone. It is inactive. And just the way that, testosterone, cortisol, there's an inactive form and it has to be converted into an active form. Thyroid has to be converted into an active form. So T4, which the thyroid gland does produce, does have to be converted into T3. T3 is the active form of thyroid, that can then be used for energy and metabolism and temperature regulation and mood and cognition, etc., etc. But where does that conversion take place? Well, 80% of that conversion happens in the liver. So the liver isn't really optional when it comes to thyroid health. It is central to thyroid health. And now just pause and think like, well, okay, Do most people's behaviors promote a healthy liver? And I think we would agree the answer would be no. But let's think about, the modern midlife lady. Maybe she's got years of dieting, chronic calorie restriction. What about alcohol? Not necessarily excessive, but alcohol. Medications, maybe stress. What about a degree of insulin resistance? Inflammation, maybe from leaky gut. The demands of estrogen metabolism. Estrogen's broken down in the liver. What about that? This is all a lot of pressure on the liver. And this doesn't mean oh, that's an unhealthy lady. Think about it. It's just a lady who's been dieting a lot, has a few drinks, maybe got a medication, stressed, family, work, whatever. Estrogen all over the place, potentially leaky gut, food sensitivities, and things like that. The liver is going to take the brunt of that. So what happens? When that starts happening and thyroid dysfunction shows up, then the doctors might often prescribe synthetic T4. Levothyroxine is the medication. And then you take that synthetic T4 and your labs might look normal, like, oh, T4 is normal again, but your tissues actually still feel hypothyroid. Because even though your labs are saying, hey, here's your levothyroxine, your T4, but you're thinking, yeah, but I'm still really tired. I'm still freezing all the time. My brain just can't even function. I'm in such a brain fog. Maybe fat loss is stored, maybe you're constipated, itchy, dry skin. So they're like, okay, let's just up the dose and up the dose. And this is what I tend to see, or I can see. But the problem was never the lack of the hormone. The problem was the poor conversion of the hormone to the active form of thyroid. So this is where, just increasing the dose of levothyroxine, of a T4 medication, is where people get stuck. If the liver is struggling, just forcing more T4 through the system doesn't fix the bottleneck. It's the conversion that's the problem. In fact, it can actually start making things worse. So you can see actually rising reverse T3. Now, reverse T3, we want T4 to be converted into the active form of T3. But in this sort of situation, what can actually happen is T4 can be converted into reverse T3, which is not active. That is also brought on, oh my gosh, a lot by chronic dieting. That's a whole separate podcast. It can happen because you've got reduced receptor sensitivity because there's more and more T4 going through the system, that the receptors become insensitive to that. Maybe, it's becoming increasingly frustration. And the woman keeps getting told, well, your labs are fine. But she knows her body is saying otherwise. So this is why some people feel like, oh, the thyroid medication, I've been taking it for years, it really just stopped working. When in reality, the system around the thyroid isn't functioning properly at all. Now, I mentioned I don't take levothyroxine, I take a bioidentical thyroid. So let's talk about this, which is kind of the interesting part. A bioidentical thyroid, particular options that include the T3 change the equation, not because they heal the liver directly, but because they reduce the reliance on liver conversion. They improve cellular signaling, they lower metabolic friction, I guess I could say. What they do is they reduce the need to push higher and higher doses of the T4. So over time, this metabolic stress decreases. Liver inflammation can improve, conversion efficiency can really improve, and I think that's my story. And receptor sensitivity can improve. So that's when something unexpected can happen, and it's when you might actually need less thyroid medication. Not because your thyroid magically fixed itself, it's just because your system became a lot more efficient. So that's what happened to me. And now, so I'm now taking half the thyroid medication that I used to. I think as Abby said, the bioidentical medication tickles your own thyroid. It gets it working again. And this is one of the ways that it does that. Now, also in the conversation was testosterone. And I have touched on this before, but I'm sure it was a long time ago. And if you're new to the podcast, you won't have heard it. So I'm going to include it here just because it was in the conversation I just had with my nurse practitioner. Um, there's still, even though the FDA kind of bowed down and, you know, uh, has, been okay with the use of HRT now. Uh, but there's still a lot of fear around testosterone in women. And the fear is usually, I really want to, but I daren't. Or I'm going to grow a beard, or worse. But I desperately want it for muscle, for sex drive. I mean, it's probably the hormone. I don't hear any woman like, oh, I'm just begging to go on estrogen. I never hear that. But they can be very persuasive to want to be put on testosterone. So as estrogen and progesterone decline, what happens is women can tolerate and often require higher testosterone levels to have the same effect of a lower testosterone level when they were younger. And this has definitely happened to me. Um, so say right now my testosterone it's good right now. My gosh, it's 76, which is amazing. I mean, for years I was never out of the 20s. But if you would have given, if I had my testosterone had been 76 when like 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been good. That wouldn't have been good. But at 58, my body can tolerate that very well. In fact, I think it can tolerate it being even higher. At one point, I was at 96. And this is because midlife ladies, and midlife and beyond, we can just tolerate more testosterone because of the estrogen and progesterone decline. Hormones just don't act in isolation. They act in ratios and they add in context to one another. So testosterone in women is going to support muscle preservation, insulin sensitivity, bone density. What about confidence, drive, libido? What about metabolic rate? It just all sounds fantastic, doesn't it? But when estrogen and progesterone are robust, they help out with a lot of those things. So the need for testosterone is actually lower. But as those hormones decline, as estrogen and progesterone decline, and therefore their role in muscle preservation, bone density, confidence, energy, metabolic rate, as their role declines, then the same absolute testosterone level has less effect. And women feel flat, weak, soft, and just straight up tired. And so now a lady, a little bit older, can actually feel better with testosterone levels that would have been way too high for her early on in life. So that's not excessive, it's not reckless, but it's actually supportive for that stage in their life because of the other hormones declining. Muscle, it's a major metabolic organ, improves insulin sensitivity. The insulin sensitivity reduces liver stress, and, reduced liver stress improves thyroid function. Um, all starts with the muscle. And what promotes muscle? One of the growth factors that we have is optimal testosterone. So if I bring these two together, why is this terrifying for most people? Most of the information, it terrifies conventional medicine. So most conventional models treat, I don't know, thyroid, sex hormones, metabolism, body composition. There's separate silos. They think of thyroid over here, sex hormones over here, metabolism over here, body composition over here. But the body just doesn't work this way. So supporting testosterone appropriately in midlife is going to protect the muscle. Protecting the muscle is going to support glucose disposal. It means there's somewhere for glucose to go. It's going to improve metabolic flexibility, the ability for the body to burn between carbs and fat and go between the two. It reduces, having that muscle reduces the reliance on pushing thyroid doses higher, which is exactly why some women find that everything stabilizes when hormones are approached holistically, when they're considered as a whole, not simply individually, I should say. So this is just a message because I know some ladies have been taking thyroid for decades and decades and they don't feel any better. And you should. Um, if your dose of something like a levothyroxine has just been put up and up and up and you don't feel any better, I would address that conversation. If you've been told your 15 testosterone is fine and you're maybe in your 50s, I would I would challenge that conversation. If you're feeling tired, poor muscle recovery, cold, and not recovering well, and nobody's addressing that, I would challenge that. You know, and tolerating, a high testosterone level is not about becoming something you're not. It's just preserving what aging is trying to take away from you. No matter how good your actions, and we can do a lot for ourselves proactively with nutrition and exercise. But age is still playing a role here, isn't it? There's no avoiding that. Um, so it's not about chasing numbers necessarily in the labs. It's really about understanding the system. And when you understand the system and don't just think of things individually, like, oh, this is your thyroid number, but what's your liver doing? What's the conversion doing? This is your testosterone number. Yeah, but how old am I? What are my symptoms? Rather than just looking at do so many ladies are just in the low normal range of everything, and the doctor's like, "Oh, you're good." You're not good. You're in the low normal range. How is that going to feel good? This is about being optimal, but it's about being in the right conversations, and it's about maybe challenging some of the old conversations you might have heard. And now I would like to address something that came up on my YouTube channel. So Joanne Lee Cornish, if you want to follow me over there. So I have this product, SLUPP332. I know it sounds fancy. That's the name of it. St. Louis University, that's what it stands for. SLUPP332. And it is a molecule and it is brilliant. It is called an exercise mimicker, which is accurate, but I don't like it being spoken about like that because it makes it sound like exercise is now an option, which is not the case. Basically, what it does is it tells the cell to burn fat for fuel. The fuel the cell has it can burn glucose for fuel, it can burn fat for fuel. As we get older, this is called metabolic flexibility, the ability for the cell to go between burning sugar for fuel and burning fat for fuel. And what happens as we get older, we lose that metabolic flexibility, and the cell becomes real bad at burning fat for fuel, and it becomes dependent on glucose for fuel. And this shows up as people that always have a sweet tooth. They always have a little bit of an energy crash. They're always snacking and grabbing a bit of sugar and things like this. That's just because the body's just become, one of the reasons is the body's just become really efficient at burning fat for fuel. So what this molecule does, and it's not a peptide, it's just a molecule. And what this molecule does is it attaches to the ERR receptor, which tells the cell to burn fat for fuel. So when we're talking body composition, it's pretty awesome, right? I mean, everybody chasing the weight loss medications, like, okay, I'm pretty sure what you're trying to do here is burn fat. I'm pretty sure the goal here is to burn fat. I don't think anybody's going into that field and thinking, oh, well, let me just burn some muscle and fat. I'm pretty sure they actually want to burn fat, which for me begs the question why you're not taking a molecule that actually burns just fat. But whatever, everybody's to their own. Um, Now, so SLU, what happens is when we exercise, especially endurance exercises, the fat burning exercises, Those exercises actually trigger a receptor which tells the cell to burn fat for fuel. That's why the fat burning exercise. Well, this molecule triggers the same receptor, which is very useful, but especially useful, especially for people in midlife where they're losing that metabolic flexibility and the body is just getting resistant to burning fat and it's burning more, it's more dependent on carbs. And this is where people say, I'm doing the same thing and I'm not losing weight, or I'm doing the same thing and my body's getting worse. And it's because one of the reasons is because of this metabolic flexibility, which is not as good as it was when we were younger. Um, I mean, if you think about when we're younger and you think about certain body types, you think, well, hold on, they're eating in excess, or the kids are eating whatever, and they don't get fat. They're really efficient at burning fat for fuel. That's why. That's one of the reasons. They're very, very efficient at burn. An ectomorph is very, very efficient at burning fat for fuel. You know? So a question that came up on my YouTube. So because, and the confusion comes from the word estrogen receptor. And that is because when we say SLU-PP332 works by activating an estrogen receptor, a lady commented like, I really want to try this, Joanne, but I'm really concerned because how is it going to affect my estrogen levels? Is it going to interfere with my hormones? And I'm like, that is a very, very valid question right there. So I thought I'd clear it up here, and I'll have to do a video for YouTube, but I'm not presentable right now, so I'll have to do it later. So the first confusion comes from the word estrogen receptor. So not all estrogen receptors are the same. So when people hear estrogen receptor, they usually think of the classic hormone receptors, the ones that respond to estrogen itself, the ones that affect things like breast tissue, uterus, menstrual cycles, hormone balance, etc. So SLU-PP332 does not interact with those receptors. It doesn't raise estrogen, it doesn't lower estrogen, it doesn't mimic estrogen, it does not bind to estrogen in the hormonal sense. SLU-PP332 works through something called the ERR alpha. That stands for estrogen-related receptor alpha. The key word there is related. ERR alpha is not activated by estrogen. It does not bind with estrogen. It does not change estrogen signaling. It's called estrogen related because of how it's originally classified structurally, not because of how it behaves. It does not behave like estrogen in the body. So the function of an ERR alpha is as a metabolic regulator. It's nothing to do with a hormone receptor. So the ERR alpha is highly expressed in metabolically active tissues. So that includes skeletal muscle, heart, liver, mitochondrial dense tissues. Its role is to regulate mitochondrial biogenesis. That is the creation of new mitochondria, the powerhouses, battery packs in our cells. I've done a podcast on this. I just did a YouTube video on this. I just did a Zoom coaching call on this. Don't ask me to explain it here, but please go look at my YouTube, go back in the podcast, come do one of my classes. But it has a role in mitochondrial biogenesis, which is awesome, the creation of new mitochondria. The ERR alpha has a role to regulate oxidative metabolism, fatty acid utilization, fat burning. Remember, we want to burn fat. And also endurance and energy, and the efficiency of both. So that is why SLU-PP332, which works on the ERR alpha, I'm sorry that sounded awful, but I'll say it again. This is why the molecule SLU-PP332, which works on the estrogen-related receptor, is often described as an exercise mimicker because it activates the pathways that normally turn on with physical activity, especially endurance type adaptations. So then you'll see like oh, you don't need to run, you just take SLU-PP332. And I'm not saying it's actually wrong, but I'm not saying that's what you should actually do. So here is the important reassurance. And Julie, if you're listening to this, this is for you, love, because you were kind enough to comment with such a pertinent question. The SLU-PP332 is not hormonal. It does not push up estrogen up or down. It does not interfere with HRT. It does not stimulate estrogen sensitive tissues at all. So if you're in midlife and you might in midlife lady and you're feeling very cautious around estrogen, and then people like me start talking about estrogen related receptors, that caution is very valid, but rest assured it does not apply here. It does not apply with SLU PP332. So now let's talk about why SLU PP332 is actually especially useful in midlife women. In midlife, what tends to decline isn't just estrogen, it's mitochondrial efficiency. So, mitochondrial efficiency, just how well you are burning and using and creating energy. So what happens with that is the muscle becomes less responsive, endurance drops. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed that. Fat burning becomes real stubborn. Recovery takes, days upon days. So the ERR, the estrogen-related receptor, that activity is part of the machinery that keeps the mitochondria active and responsive. And SLU-PP332 helps turn those pathways back on. The pathways, muscle becoming more responsive, endurance improving, fat burning improving, recovery improving. It's not forcing fat loss, it's not suppressing appetite, it's not altering hormones, but what it's doing is it's improving the body's ability to use fuel efficiently, just like it did when we were younger. To improving the body's ability to burn fat for fuel. Now, it's been promoted as an exercise mimicker. Like I say, it's accurate, but I hate that because SLU-PP332 actually pairs really, really well with daily movement and resistance training. And that's because it supports muscle endurance. I mean, that is one of the biggest things I notice taking it. My endurance is so much better. It supports fat oxidation, burning body fat for fuel. It supports metabolic output and the energy that's actually available because of how good it is for the mitochondria that makes the energy in the first place. So this is exactly what many midlife women are struggling with or struggling to maintain. The muscle endurance, the fat burning, the metabolic output, the energy even on a cellular level that's actually even available to them, even when they're doing everything right. So another important distinction here, because the stuff I like always gets mixed up with the other stuff. The SLU-PP332 does not create aggressive fat loss on its own. Yes, it absolutely allows for fat loss, promotes fat loss, but it's not this aggressive fat loss. Um, it doesn't override physiology. What it does do is it improves metabolic capacity, especially in the muscle. So that's why it's often described as helping the body behave more like it does during regular activity, even when somebody's not active. It's also why it feels, I think of it as more as a supportive rather than stimulating supplement. I prefer to think of it like clearing pathways that we used to have. I think of it more like creating the environment that we used to have, but it's not creating an artificial environment. It's just clearing pathways and improving efficiency. But again, if you look up SLU PP332, it's going to say estrogen related receptor. Please rest assured that it does not affect estrogen levels. It's got nothing to do with estrogen levels. It doesn't bind with estrogen receptor. It doesn't affect hormone control at all. It certainly does not interfere with HRT or menopausal balance. What it does do, it works on metabolic receptors that are involved in telling the cell what fuel to use, which in turn improves muscle, improves endurance, improves fat oxidation. It's a very, very different conversation. And that difference is exactly why it's such a good fit for midlife ladies, midlife men, because it's got nothing to do with hormones. It's about energy handling. It's about muscle efficiency. It's about metabolic resistance. I mean, it's a support molecule. It's nothing, it's not touching the hormonal ones. So again, if you're choosing tools in midlife, that distinction really matters. And you've got to be really careful what you want. I mean, there's a drive here for, I get it, it's human nature. We want this and we want it now. There's a danger to that. There's a danger. Gosh, you can think of so many analogies here, but there's a danger in getting what you want too quickly. And, and that's just it, right? We've got the attention spans of gnats right now. We want everything we want right, want it right now. And then we're given tools that create that, but are they the best tools? I just ask that if you're listening to this podcast, Midlife Mayhem, we have to pause and consider, what do we really want here? Because we do not have the luxury of being able to reverse things. We don't have the luxury of losing a ton of muscle and like, oh, well, that was a mistake. Let me just put it back on again. We don't have that luxury. We don't have that luxury of, oh my gosh, I lost all that weight. My face just fell to the floor. That's okay. I'll put it back. We don't have that luxury. And I did a podcast on that. When we start losing muscles in our hands and our face, grip strength and facial muscles, they're probably not coming back. It's a whole different conversation in midlife. And therefore, we have to be very cautious and be very deliberate about what our goal actually is, because we do not have the luxury to reverse some situations that we create. Now, our frustration is real. Not mine, I'm doing fine, but most people's frustration is real because they're seeing their bodies energy physically change and they don't understand why, because they're doing the same things. In fact, they're working harder. But when you understand these pathways, now I also totally, and especially given this podcast, I totally respect anybody that wants nothing to do with anything I have spoken about for the last however long this is. They don't want to hear about taking the thyroid medication. They definitely don't want to hear about taking testosterone. And they're definitely weirded out by me talking about these molecules that I take. And I absolutely respect that. And I equally respect anybody like myself who is, I'm a brat. I'm a brat. I want my body to work effectively. I want it to work efficiently. I want to be happy. I want to have a high energy. I want my training to work. I want my nutrition to work. I'm very happy doing the work. Nobody will outwork me like that. But I want it all to work properly. And when it doesn't, I'm a brat. And that's why I will look at every scenario. I will look at and again, but also please know, I am not reckless. I am, believe me, I have been in my life, but I am not reckless. I will, I will do things and with nutrition and exercise and supplements like this to improve an environment that benefits me as a whole. I'm never going to do something that benefits one aspect of my life, but makes other aspects worse. I'm never going to. I'm trying to think of a good example here. I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example without just referring to the weight loss medications, because I have no problem with those. You've just got to be very clear about your goal. But if I could take some things like, oh, it's going to burn all the fat off your body, but it's going to wreck your heart, and you're going to be in a bad mood, or you're going to be anxious. Or, oh, remember fen-phen? Do you remember fen-phen? Gosh, when was that, the 90s or something? And I had clients all taking this fen-phen, and they were literally wired, like panic attack, wired, stressed out, chewing their own inside of their mouths, or tweakers, and they didn't care because they were losing weight. That's never me. I'm never gonna sacrifice my joy. I'm never gonna sacrifice other things just for one thing. So anything I do has to work as a whole. It has to lift me, um, all of me, like every aspect of my life, multi-dimensional. It has to, and that comes from improving pathways, not individual things. So to go full circle, the use of thyroid. I'm a brat. I'm done being cold. I'm dry skin, brain fog, all the rest of it. Got help, and it has been monitored several times a year for decades. The use of testosterone. My testosterone was virtually zero. Felt awful, super tired. The use of, and it is monitored at least twice a year. This year will actually be 3 times a year. The use of this molecule, SLUPP332, which I combine with my other product, 5-amino-1-MQ, both of which you can find out on my YouTube channel. Lots of videos on it. I researched these for a long time, and these support my protocol on life. I'm like, these products, these 2 products will benefit me and not sacrifice anything. These will just make me better as a whole on every level. I'm not making a sacrifice by using these. I do, however, because these are research molecules, they will never be FDA approved. They will never be, they can't be patented. Nobody's ever going to make much money on these. So you must always do your own research. Be your own advocate, as my Dr. Howard used to say. Be your own boss. Be a grown up, and make your own decisions, and challenge conversations that don't sound right. If you're interested in the SLUPP332 or my 5-amino-1-MQ, then you can go to my website at joannlee.com. They're right there, or go to joannleestore.com. They're right there. If you want more information on them, go to, look anywhere you want. Don't take my word for it. Go anywhere you want. This has been medical literature going back decades on both of these. But if you want to hear it from me, go to my YouTube channel, Joanne Lee Cornish on YouTube, and look for the playlist. And there's about 17 videos on there on these 2 supplements. Okay, that's it for now. Now I have got a lot of topics coming up. So I'm just started coaching my Victory Vault program. The next program coming up, I believe it starts on February the 16th, is Muscle Month. Guys, don't miss it. Don't miss it. I'm really running my programs back to back this year. If you pause, they'll be gone. So don't miss it. That you can find that at musclemonth.com, or just go to my website. But I'm looking at the list. I've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. So get ready. Midlife Mayhem. I do hope you enjoyed this podcast. You can find me all over social. Just search for my name, Joanne Lee Cornish, and of course my website, joannlee.com. Be sure to check out what program I have got right now. I'm sure to be running something. And remember, you can always contact me, joanne@joannlee.com. Until next time.